You're listening to audio from the Decidedly podcast. For more information, find us on Instagram at Decidedly Podcast.
Has anybody ever attempted to scam you?
Yeah, all the time.
Really?
For sure. I mean, from homeless people who are just trying to catch the bus, man. To I heard one from a friend of mine who got scammed by a homeless person. She said somebody came up to her and said, "Hey, like, I got this Starbucks gift card, but like, I don't really like Starbucks. You just give me $20. You have this gift card." And she was like, "Oh yeah, fair trade.
Wow,
sure." And she goes to the Starbucks. Obviously, there's freaking nothing on the card. Obviously,
of course.
But yeah, people try to scam me.
I had it happen. They didn't successfully scam me, but there was a charge that got a fraud alert on it. I'm there with my assistant, and I said, "Well, let's just try and call them directly and see if we can clear this up." So we call the number on the back of my Visa card, and they said, hello, this is Visa fraud alert, blah blah blah. I said, okay, we're trying to clear this up, and they said, oh yes, right away, we're going to clear this up for you, no problem. Before we do, wanted to let you know you're the 1,000th caller today, and you win like $100 gift card if you'll just do this quick survey. And I'm like, oh, okay. And normally I'd be skeptical of that, but I called them. I called Visa. All right, so I called Visa. All right, so it's Visa. So they said, all right, well, what's your account number? I give them the account. The name on the account number, blah, blah. Okay. And they start asking more information. What's your the billing address and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, they should have this.
Yeah.
And I'm starting to get suspicious, but I called them. This is Visa. And I said, all right. And they said, all right, so we're going to send you out the $100. It's going to be be a check made out to you. We'll send it to the billing address you gave us, blah, blah, blah. We're going to FedEx that. So you do need to pay like $2.95. Like, that's fair trade, I guess, whatever. And so I said, all right, well, transfer me over to the fraud department. I said, okay, and then we got disconnected. I was like, I said to my assistant, did that smell right to you? That whole interaction? She goes, no, that was sketch. But, but we called them. That was Visa. I said, all right, pull up the number we just called. And let's double check the number. Right. So we look at the number, we pull up on the most recent numbers. It was one digit off. So the scammers got the number that was one digit off. So rather than 8, it was a 5 or whatever it was. So I'm like, damn it. All right. So we call Visa. We're like, hey, there's a charge that's going to be going through. Number one, don't pay that. They go, yeah, we just saw this. It's like $4.95 and we'll reject that. I said, okay. They said it was going to be $2.95. But anyway, so I said, cancel the card. Yeah. And they're like, okay, we'll cancel. We'll give you a new number. So we had to cancel the whole card because of that. But anyway, I was like, I got to give them credit. It was clever.
That is clever. At least if you're going to scam me, at least be clever. That's what I said.
I had to give them props. Yeah.
At least then I can appreciate the creativity, and maybe for the price of $4.95, you get a story out of it. Our guest today is an expert in cybercrime, and if you're interested in how to protect your business from the threat of cybercrime that is increasing in our day and age, then stick around. Jeff Lanza was an FBI special agent for over 20 years, during which he investigated cybercrime. He was more or less one of the original agents to focus his career on cybercrime when he started working with the FBI. He focused on organized crime, human trafficking, and terrorism. He's lectured at Harvard and Princeton, written 2 critically acclaimed books. He's all over TV talking about the growing threat of cybercrime in today's life. And today he's on our podcast, so stick around. We promise not to scare you too much, but I think you'll learn a little bit, and I think you'll be glad that you did. My name is Sanger Smith. As always, I'm with my dad, Shawn Smith, and this is Decidedly.
Hey, Jeff, how you doing?
I'm doing good. How about you?
Good.
Welcome, Jeff.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
I assume that you're going to scare me today, and I'll give you full permission to do that.
Is this the first time you've been interviewed by the FBI?
Yeah, actually.
Yeah, well, that's good.
Shockingly, the first time.
Jeff, how did you get into working with the FBI? You were in the corporate world before that, and you got recruited in by the FBI. Tell me how that happened.
Yeah, so I wanted to be an FBI agent since I was a kid. Growing up watching television shows on a Sunday night on one of the three networks that you could watch. You had a choice of Lassie, The World of Disney, and a show called The FBI starring Ephraim Zimbalist Jr. This dates back to the late 1960s and early 70s, but I watched that show and I thought, I'd like to solve these kind of crimes in 60 minutes. Sounds like an exciting career. But I wasn't qualified to get in the FBI when I graduated from college, even though I had a criminal justice degree. That's not the type of degree the FBI really seeks out, believe it or not.
What do they seek out?
They look for people that have accounting skills. They look for lawyers. They hire people with engineering skills, computer science, foreign language.
All of that sounds far less exciting than...
criminal justice sounds way more fun.
Counterterrorism, counterintelligence that usually people get in the military. So I went to work for Xerox coming out of school after I got an MBA. But in my job with Xerox, I was a computer specialist. I learned all about how to program some of Xerox's laser printers, and that experience, that computer science experience, is what the FBI was looking for at the time they hired me. So.
What were they wanting you to do in the FBI with that kind of background?
Cybercrime was, we're talking about 1988. It wasn't really on anybody's radar screen in terms of what we're seeing today, but it was something the FBI was thinking about in terms of we're going to need some specialists that can dedicate their investigative skills to basically looking at these crimes that they expected were going to come with the computer age.
Oh, so they were looking at kind of like right now how we're looking at AI saying, oh, there's a lot of threats that may come. So they hire you to come in and go, hey, you know more about computers than the next
because this is pre-internet, at that point.
Yeah, that must have required some foresight on their part.
Yeah, now nobody heard of a phishing email, nobody heard of email, and so but there were other types of things that that an agent with my background could work, including white-collar crime in a general sense, public corruption cases, fraud. And that's what I was assigned to for most of my early part of my career anyway.
What were some of the things that you saw at that time?
So, another reason why I wanted to get in the FBI is because I was fascinated with the mob. And if you go back in the 1980s, we didn't have the internet, but we had huge issues with mafia presence in all the major cities, including Kansas City, where I was sent to. And so I was excited for the opportunity to work the mob, to do mafia investigations. And organized crime was on the top of the FBI's priority list at that time. So when I got to Kansas City, we had a major organized crime case where they were skimming money from Las Vegas casinos. If you've ever seen the movie Casino, it kind of is based on that story. The mob family in Kansas City was involved in that skimming operation where they were taking money from the casino count rooms and bringing it back to Kansas City. And that case ended before I got to Kansas City as a new FBI agent. But there were still some remnants of the mob family here and throughout the country that were doing other things as well. But the one thing that sticks out more than anything, it helps illustrate where the mob had come to the point they had come to in 1988. So we're on a wiretap on a mobster's phone. And, when you get to the FBI and you're a new agent, you usually get put on, the duties that a lot of senior agents don't want to work. But listening to a wire is actually very important and requires a lot of training. And you got to know when to turn off the microphone and turn it back on, and how to listen properly so you get the evidence that you need. So we had a mobster's phone tapped. His name was Tony. and he gets a call from Joe. Now, as the FBI listens, here's how it goes. Tony says, "Joe, I'm really glad you called." And Joe goes, "Yeah, why?" Tony goes, "I got a little problem. I think the FBI is tapping my phone." And Joe goes, "Oh, yeah? Well, what are you going to do about it?" And Tony says, "Well, I got a new number." So lacking any common sense, Joe goes, "Okay, good. Give me the number." Now, Tony gets just a tiny bit of common sense. He says, "Well, I better not give it to you on the phone. I'll meet you for lunch and I'll give it to you then." And Joe says, "Well, I can't meet you for lunch." Tony says, "Okay, well, I'll give it to you now over the phone, but I'll give it to you backwards." Yeah. So he gave him the 7-digit number reverse order. What did the FBI do? We got our best cryptologists on that one right away.
That's sort of an Enigma machine job there.
That's right. It took us 6 months with the powerful computers we had in 1988.
Right.
Never decode it. But, it tells you where the mob had come to at that point in time. But then also it illustrates a key point to what I like to talk about today with audiences is, common sense is important in everyday life, but it's also important to prevent fraud. And what criminals try to do is manipulate our thinking when it comes to computers and phishing emails and the most common scams that people are victimized by. It's all related to common sense. And if we used a little more common sense and not let emotions take over, we'll be less likely to be victimized. So that story really has some meaning even today as we talk about how to stay safe from these cyber threats for the average person.
I would think the biggest vulnerability on cybersecurity is the human element because, that's where we crack. I don't think there's anybody in there trying to run some algorithm on, my phone or my laptop. They're just hoping I mess up and fall for some stupid thing. I got a deal over Christmas that I looked at it and I would imagine it was going out to millions of people, which was, your package has been delayed. Click this to track it. Well, I didn't because I didn't have any packages out that were
and they
delayed.
Don't even tell you where it's from.
No, it had like a little
generic package.
Yeah, it's had like a UPS logo on the bottom. I'm like, I didn't order it. I've got all my stuff.
Yeah.
But around that time of year, you would imagine a good percentage of the people are going to fall for that. They're going like, oh yeah, grandma's shirt never did show up. Click on it. I would just think, what was the worst deal you ever saw on cybersecurity breaches?
Well, I mean, just recently. Well, I'll go back a little bit in time and then tell you about some recent ones as well. But
yeah,
when I was still working for the FBI, we had a case where a company got scammed by what's called a business email compromise. And if people in the audience that are listening to this podcast, if you are small business, medium-sized business owner, or even large business owners, please pay careful attention to what I'm going to say next because it's still happening today, right? So an email comes to the CFO in the company and requests a wire transfer to China. Now, the CEO happened to be in China doing business, which was a normal course of operations for this company. But the criminals had hijacked the email account or spoofed it to make it look like it was the real email of the executive, requested a wire transfer. We can't talk about this right now. It's very sensitive. Don't tell anybody. Just send this wire. And it was like, $8.2 million or something like that. And that pales in comparison to some other ones that have been even more than that, all based on hijacking an email account and acting like you're the CEO asking for money from a underling in the company. So that's happening all the time. Millions and millions of dollars are being lost based on that scam alone. And then the other one that more recently occurred was the ransomware attack. And we've seen a lot of these, by the way. There's some in the news today that are affecting people who are trying to close on houses, but they can't do it because the title companies' computers have been locked up. That's going on as we kind of speak now. But look at two.
What's the benefit of what are the hackers trying to accomplish by scrambling the computers of the title company?
Getting a ransom payment.
So what they're just shutting down the whole business and say, okay,
the computers are locked up.
How often is that effective? If I'm running a title company and they scramble or they hack in and lock up my computer system, how often are people just bending over, just paying the money versus just going down the tubes, or what happens on that?
Yeah. So, we don't have figures on that specifically tell us who's paying and who's not paying. Because when companies pay, sometimes they don't report it to the FBI. And sometimes companies don't want to report it even if they don't pay. So we don't really have a lot of figures on that. But to help answer your question, Shawn, let's look at a tale of two companies. Everybody's heard of MGM. Everybody's heard of Caesars. So hotel, casino chains. In September, both companies were hacked with a ransomware attack, which is basically simply a piece of malware that propagates through their computer network, locks up their computers, so you pretty much can't do anything. Payroll, your computers don't run in a company. They're at MGM, if you wanted to place a bet at one of their kiosks in their casino, there was an emoji of a sad, frowning face. Sorry, you can't do it. Really? That's what you use to express that you've had this ransomware attack? Yeah, you can place a bet. And ask me how I know all this, by the way. Anyway, so it
was a bad Vegas trip.
The ransomware request to get the key that unlocks the malware that encrypted their data on their computers, the request was for $30 million. So to answer your question, Shawn, that's the payout, right? That's where they're making their profit. If they pay the money, they get the key, then it's going to be less time to require to get back up and running. All right, so MGM refused to pay, right? They didn't want to pay the $30 million. And according to the Wall Street Journal, it was going to cost them $100 million to get back up and running again in terms of downtime, lost business, lost betting, whatever, $100 million. So you could see the incentive to pay the money is probably, what's making companies pay. Now, on the other hand, Caesars decided to pay the ransom, and they paid. They bargained it down to $15 million. They paid, according to published reports, again, Wall Street Journal, to get their encryption key, so it would take less time to get back up and running. So the profit is the reason why they're doing it. The criminals is because of profit. They're making a lot of money. If you can make $15 million by sending somebody an email that has a piece of malware attached to it that locks up a computer network for a company, why not do it? And that's what we're seeing happening across the board, not just at these two casino operators.
So a lot of people hear that and they get really scared because they go, okay, yeah, I recognize scams all the time, but I only recognize the ones that I recognize. Surely, what if there's ones that are really good and they don't misspell UPS or they don't, they don't do something stupid that sets off my common sense because they're not stupid criminals, so they create something smart.
Yeah, right.
But what do you have to say about that?
Well, there's several layers that a company could use to help stay safe from these things. First of all, you educate employees. You send test emails. You say, you send one that looks like a fake email and see how many employees click on it. That helps a little bit, but really, 2 weeks later, they'll be clicking on it, even if they've received remedial training. Right? They're going to click on it the next time it happens. That may help a little bit. Then you have antivirus software, which prevents some of those things from getting through. So that's a perimeter of security. And when it gets past antivirus software, you may be able to prevent it from getting through the whole system if you catch it quickly enough. So even if for the real good stuff that you may not notice and you may click on Sanger because it isn't misspelled and AI is being used to make it look more realistic and not have the syntax or spelling errors, which is what's happening as well today. There's other stoppage points. There's other ways that it'll be stopped. And then ultimately, if they have their computer backed up in a certain way, they should be able to recover quickly without paying a ransom. But not all those companies are not prepared for these things.
So how is a company as big as Caesars not doing what you just articulated? Sounds very simple. Mm-hmm. How is a company of that size with as much to lose how do they not do that?
Yeah. For the backup, I don't know. They should at least have that as the final point. If the worst thing happens, they should be able to recover without paying a ransom. And we take profit away from the criminals, then they're not going to keep doing it if there's no profit incentive.
Right. It would seem like you can log in remotely through those passwords, go back to yesterday's backup, and be up and running. I mean, I don't understand how it's getting locked up like that.
Yeah. From a technical standpoint, the criminals are smart enough now to encrypt the backup. So they go into a system. I mean, They steal credentials. It's not just phishing emails. I mean, that's one way they get in with malware and things like that. They also get credentials. They steal credentials from people who have weak passwords potentially, or they trick customer service reps into thinking that they're, to allow them to get in to a certain level of access, and then they up that access to get into higher and higher levels of access. They're really good.
I heard one story of some company. This was back in the days when, with UPS drives, and they went in front of this company and just dropped several UPS drives in front of the front door, the employee entrance, that had the malware on it.
Oh, wow.
And people just pick them up off the ground. It's like, let's see what this is.
Wonder whose Christmas card pictures are on this thing.
It just,
wow.
Put them on there.
That's like the Mike Leach. This is totally not cybersecurity related. You know Mike Leach.
Oh, yeah, sure.
He was former Texas Tech, Washington State, Mississippi State head coach. When he was offensive coordinator at OU and the University of Texas.
Oh, I've heard this story. I love this.
He wants to sabotage the other team, so he creates a fake playbook and had one of the graduate assistants run by the sidelines of the Longhorns players during warm-ups and drop it on the floor. And they pick it up and they're preparing their defensive schemes for these totally BS plays. It's hard to believe that stuff that simple and goofy can work, but I guess it can. I'm always amazed at the size of companies that or that the attacks that seem to have simple prevention methods that large companies still allow themselves to be vulnerable to. But for a smaller company that's maybe saying, hey, I don't have the resources of Caesars, of MGM, and I'm still, I'm doing the things that Jeff's saying to do, but is that enough? What would you say to a family business owner who's wondering, hey, is what I have by following these simple steps, is that enough to keep you safe?
I would say if they're using what's called the 3-2-1 rule of backups, they're probably going to be okay. So it's 3 copies of all your files in 2 different places, and at least one of them's off-site. So that would be you have your stuff on your computer. Let's just take an example of a small network in a company. It's on the computer. Those are your production files. That's what you're working with every day, or Excel spreadsheets and so forth, and all the stuff that customers are customer information that's needed to run the business, right? So that's your one copy of your files, one copy. Second copy may be on a backup drive, but make that off-site. So if something happens, it's less likely that they could get to that off-site copy that's backed up. And the worst that can happen is maybe you can lose a day. And then you put a copy in the cloud as a third option. So you got your files in 3 different places, and at least one of them is off-site. And also using 2 different medium. That's the 2 part I didn't mention. So you may even have backup tape. They can't get to the tapes. You back up the tape, you take it off the system. They can't get to that because it's not connected to the internet. So
yeah. I did years ago. I had an intern that came and worked for us, and I was just being a jerk. I was having him shred a bunch of stuff that was confidential information for a client. I said, just take this over the shredder and just shred all this, but just in case, make a copy of everything first. For records. He's like, yes, sir, boss. Here, what are you doing?
Is that like a test? That was like an intelligence.
Yeah, it was a test, and he failed.
That's the common sense that leaves your company vulnerable, Jeff.
Wow, that's crazy,
man.
So you were telling a story about the CEO that's over in China and calls to the CFO and says, "Hey, wire this money." So how do companies prevent that kind of vulnerability, particularly with voice spoofing, AI, voice recognition type stuff?
Yeah. In the case I mentioned, it wasn't a phone call. It probably wouldn't have happened if it was a phone call. It was just basically an email. I can't talk. We can't talk on the phone. So pay attention to these instructions. It's the only ones you're going to get. So you can't defend against that unless you don't pay attention to the instructions and you pick up the phone and you verify. And that's all they had to do would have prevented that from happening. Now you got voice spoofing, you got AI recording videos or voices of CEOs, and then they can make it sound like the real person. Another trick the criminals are using is they're taking AI and they're scanning annual reports. CEOs always write letters in annual reports. The opening letter, usually the first couple of pages. They use that language that the CEO, how they talk, that type of verbiage is plugged into AI and then used to craft emails to executives working underneath them, so they'll be more convincing. Send me this money. This has to be done right away. You can't call me back because of this unique nature of this situation.
Because a lot of times those types of emails, the ones that I've seen, I immediately recognize a flag because there's a grammar error. They misspell a very common word in the English language, or they're pretending to be someone I know and they're talking different. And I'm like,
right. They're not talking like somebody.
Shawn doesn't talk like that. Shawn doesn't have run-on sentences that go forever and ever. That's goofy. I had one a few months ago where an employee at my company sends me an email from another employee and says, hey, see this? He needs to change his info for payroll. And so I just go, okay, cool. And I start making the change. And all of a sudden, something goes off. I'm like, obviously I need to check and call, because if this was a client that was having me change his account number, I would call him. So I'm going to treat my employee the same as a client. And as I pick up the phone to call him, I'm like, wait a second, this doesn't say, before he even answers, I'm like, he's not doing this. He wouldn't. Right. Why would he have just called me? And then as soon as he answered, I go, you didn't send me this email, did you? He goes, what are you talking about? I go, yeah, okay.
I had that years ago. There was an email I got supposedly from a client. She'd said, I'm in Europe. I'm stuck. I need, some money to, get back or whatever like that. And, I happen to know.
I ran out of minutes on my phone. I can't call you.
Yeah. Yeah. Just send me money, to this account. I need it. I was like, first of all, I know this client, there's no way this person's in Europe.
You wouldn't have even gone to Europe.
Right. So I happen to know this, but we always call, like you're saying, call first. I think that's the best way, obviously.
Well, they picked the wrong client in this particular case. They should have picked one that traveled to you. But let's take that a step further. So I'm going to anonymize this as much as possible. So I just gave a speech a few weeks ago at a big conference for an association. And I wanted to find an example of this that was very specific to this particular industry. And I found one. And somebody received an email from a supposed vendor. They looked online. They saw at this particular organization that a vendor had been just about to finish up this huge construction project, right? And so they figured, all right, maybe they have some outstanding invoices that haven't been paid yet. So they dummied up an invoice and send it, or not dummied it up. They just basically sent an email and said, for this remaining invoice, please send it to this bank account instead of the one you've been sending it to. And they fell for it. And it was like $1 million. And so anyway, I told the association, I go, I'm going to use this example. Is anybody in the group going to be in that? Would they possibly be the victim, be in that audience? Oh, they're definitely going to be there. And I didn't want to embarrass anybody, so I couldn't use that particular example. But they did send the money. All you got to do is pick up the phone. Think about this, guys. How many times do businesses change bank accounts? And how many times do they change bank accounts? Right when there's an outstanding invoice for $1 million that's about to be paid. Oh, we're just happening to change our bank account. We're getting a better deal at this bank instead of this bank. And by the way, send the $1 million there. Does that even make sense? Again, common sense, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's really, I think the optimism here is that by educating people and simply making people aware, it sounds like we can avoid a lot of these issues. If people I have to think that the reason people fall for something like that is they can't believe that it's actually a threat, right? None of those people who are sending $1 million wires are probably pulling up to a dirty gas station on the east side of town and leaving their car unlocked while they go in. Hey, right? They're with their purse on the dash, right? They're not doing that. Well, because they're aware of the risks. Right? We've got to be aware of the cybercrime risks. You were talking about passwords earlier. People steal credentials by getting access through weak passwords. In my experience, a lot of my clients don't understand what a weak password is. And I'll find out one way or another. Say, hey, log into your site real quick and let's check it out. And I see it's like 5 characters. I go, geez, what are we doing? What are the elements of a strong password?
So traditionally, it has to be at least 8 characters, have upper and lower case, and a symbol a special symbol like $, exclamation point, quotation mark, anything like that. And that's what our National Institute of Standards and Technology has recommended for years, up until about 5 years ago. And because of the complexity of that, and because people don't want to come up with those type of passwords, or if they do, because it's required for a website or to get access, they will use that same one every time for all their accounts. So then you have a breach at one place, and the criminals use something called credential stuffing. They figure out what a password is, and then they use it across other accounts that people have, and then that credential stuffing technique is then used to hack into accounts. So NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology, a few years ago said, let's not use complicated passwords anymore. Let's go to passphrases. So think about something that's unique for an account and only use it for that account. So let's use an example. Amazon, right? So you try to come up with a password for Amazon, a passphrase. So instead of come up with uppercase A, lowercase c, B3, 5, Q, exclamation point, how are you going to remember that, number one? And then if you just use that for everything, then you're putting yourself at risk. So here's a unique one for Amazon. What's unique about Amazon? They have free delivery with Prime. Used to be 2 days. And it's like 1 day. Sometimes it's same day, depending on where you live. I think Amazon's moving towards a new model. It's going to be free delivery yesterday. So here we go. So there's my passphrase for Amazon. Free delivery yesterday. All one word, all lowercase, acceptable to Amazon. Only use it there. And, this is just an example, but you don't use it for your credit card site. You don't use it for an email account.
Sure.
And so,
it sounds like we know Jeff's Amazon password.
I'm about to order so much from it.
Yeah. 23andMe had a big hack. It was well publicized. And they at first said it wasn't our fault. It's because people were reusing passwords that had been breached before from, LinkedIn and Yahoo and all those other things they had. And the most common passwords people were using were monkey. Monkey. Why is that a common password? I have no idea. Anyway, so I thought of something for 23andMe, so it's unique for 23andMe. I don't know if you know about this, but people are uploading their DNA that they get back from 23andMe to these public sites, and it's being used to identify criminals, usually through second or third cousins that have committed crimes a long time ago, cold cases, and it's been very successful. Detectives have solved a lot of cold cases. The Golden State Killer, responsible for murders going back decades, was caught that way. Several other like that too. So I like this one for 23andMe, if you did have an account there. All right, here it is. So my third cousin is wanted by the FBI.
Do I have to include my third cousin's full legal name so you can find him, Jeff?
Just to make that longer.
The point that you're making is something that I heard from another expert in the field, is that complexity is not necessarily as important as length, right? I mean, sure, of course, you could have, just because it's a simple password that's 4 characters is not necessarily better than a weird random 3 characters. It's not a linear relationship, but length is really, really important for password security.
12 characters should be the minimum for a phrase.
Have you seen that passwordstrengthmeter.com?
Yeah. I mean,
Have you seen that?
No. What is that?
So you can go test how strong a password is, and it gives you, based on the password that you put in, it'll show you how long it would take a hacker to force their way to it.
Yeah.
So you should go check it out and put your own password in there and go, you'll be shocked. This will take 47 seconds for a hacker to get in. You add a phrase to the end and just say, maybe you could just write, "This is my password" at the end. Those characters, now it's 1,000 years. When they measure the length of time that it takes to crack in, what does that mean? Because is there some computer that's auto? Because the way it's always been described to me is, they have a computer that just tries randomly generated passwords until they figure it out. How does that work? Because when I try my password and I get it wrong 3 times, I've got to call the corporate office.
Yeah, it locks me out.
Yeah. So how is that working?
Not everything locks you out. There's email accounts like Yahoo. They won't lock you out. You could try it a million times and you're not going to lock you out. for example.
Okay.
But you're right. Your corporate computers, they better lock you out after 3 times. But so that wouldn't work in those cases. But the brute force hacking for sites where they don't lock you out after 3 times, you just keep trying. Brute force is using powerful software and computers just to guess random combinations until it hits on the right one.
And if you use the same password for everything, then they're going to have your password that does lock you out.
Yeah, and think about this too. If I fall for one of these phishing emails from Gmail, so Google sends me an email, not Google, but the correct criminal copies all the logos and everything. You're in danger of losing your Gmail access. Someone's hacked into your account. Change your password right away. Change it here. They put up a fake page.
Yeah.
So basically, you give your password to the bad guy. They go to your Gmail account. They log in, and if you don't have 2-factor authentication, which I can talk about in a second, then they're in your Gmail account. And then they're looking through your Gmail, and they say, "Oh, this guy's getting emails from Chase credit card company. He must have a Chase account. Let's go to the Chase account and plug in that same password that he used over here. And if he's using the same one, bada bing, bada boom, they're in that one too, and it can go on from there." Which is why 2-factor authentication is another way to keep safe. Everybody should be using that at a minimum for your email accounts, social media, which are targets for criminals, and also financial accounts. So you get a code sent to your phone, or you get an authenticator app where you say, "Yes, this is me trying to log in." And your criminal could be 6 miles away or 6,000 miles away. They can't log in. They don't have the phone in their hand. So they're not going to be able to use the app to log in or put that code in.
So a friend of mine had a coworker who got his entire checking and savings account wiped out.
Yeah.
And my first question was, how did that happen? Oh, they got his password. And I go, well, I have 2-factor authentication on my bank account. Does he not have 2-factor authentication on his bank account? And he said, here's the crazy thing. He did. I said, well, how did he hack in? He said, somehow the hackers got remote access to his phone. Have you heard of that?
Yeah, I've heard of that, but more commonly than getting remote access to the phone, and Apples are going to be hard to do that on. The iPhone is very difficult for that to happen. Android, more likely because you can download the apps for an Android in different places. You might download it from a bogus place and get malware on the phone, which can do what you're saying. More commonly, though, Sanger, it's where there's something called the SIM card swap happens, where they call up Verizon. And they know the guy uses Verizon because, again, they got into his email account and they say, "Hey, this is Jeff. I have, I've got a new phone. I lost my phone. I need to reset my phone number to this device that I'm holding in my hand." And they ask you a few questions. What's your mother's maiden name? What's your birth date? Where'd you go to high school? And they know all that because they found it on Facebook. And then all of a sudden now they have all the texts and the phone calls come to the new phone in the hands of a criminal, and they get those 2-factor texts. And
it sounds like AT&T is a little bit liable, or Verizon, or whoever's doing that. I would want them, if some criminal called up and said, "Send me a new SIM card," I'd want AT&T to say, "Okay, well, let's at least call the old number."
Yeah.
Ask. They don't do that.
It doesn't sound like they do, and I think that the main thing we should do is to call our cell phone provider when you have an hour to stay on hold, right? And then just say, "Hey, I want a password set up or a PIN code set up. If anybody's going to make changes on this account, make sure they know this PIN."
Yeah, I've got that on my stuff, the password, and then I also froze all my credit report stuff.
That is such a hack that nobody knows about, and almost every time I tell people about freezing your credit, they go, "I didn't know this was possible," or they go, "I don't want to pay for it." And I go, "You don't have to pay for it. It's so easy."
Yeah, it is. I mean, nobody can. I can. The problem is if I change, electricity providers or something, I have to unfreeze everything.
Years. That's
it's not.
And that never happens. I have had clients who say, "Oh, my brother-in-law, he just got his checking account cleaned out by some hacker." And I go, "Okay, well, here's the rundown of things that I want you to do to be safe." And they're usually worried about their investment account. I go, "Okay, that's probably the safest thing you have. Let's talk about your bank account. Make sure you have a good password on there. Make sure you're not you're not swiping a debit card on your checking account that has $1 million in it. You know, if you're going to swipe a debit card, swipe it on your $5,000 account and keep your $1 million account nobody knows about, and you don't ever use that number. And then I say, freeze your credit. That's the easiest thing you can do. A lot of people are like, oh, I don't want to. Oh, that costs money. Oh, that's inconvenient. Because what if when I want to go buy a house, I have to spend 15 minutes on hold with TransUnion?
Right.
And I go, that sounds better than.
Yeah, it's totally worth it.
Identity.
But you'll forget. So I forgot that I had frozen mine. And I went to, as I said, change electricity providers. And the new provider comes back and said, oh, you're rejected. I'm like, I'm rejected for electricity? They're like, yeah, we're not going to cover you. I'm like, what? They're like, well, you didn't pass the credit report. I said, what are you talking about? They're like, well, we couldn't get one. I said, oh, that's different. And then I remembered I'd frozen
reveal the information,
buddy. Right. Then I remembered, oh yeah, all right, give me 10 minutes. Let me unfreeze this.
I had a funny one at when I went to go buy a house a few years ago. The guy goes, okay, hey, get me, and I had thought I had unfrozen them already. He goes, same deal. Hey, I'm going to run a report and see what we can get. And he comes back and he goes, we're going to, do a 3% interest or whatever. And I was like, really? I mean, at the time, like interest rates were lower. I go, that seems like a little high for what the market is. And he goes, yeah. I go, you ran all 3 credit reports? He goes, well, we ran Equifax and Experian. I go, why didn't you run TransUnion? He goes, oh, well, we couldn't get through. It was frozen. I go, well, how do you ever run it again? And he runs it again and he goes, oh, it's 2.6.
You could have boned me.
Yeah, I would have paid so much more for no reason, just because you were lazy. But other than that, you should freeze your credit.
Freezing is really easy and it's free. And it keeps you safe from lots of fraud. I highly recommend it. When I talk to my audiences, especially wealth advisors and their clients, first thing I say in the presentation, freeze your credit reports, easy to do. And you'll be glad you did it when they try to get, some credit in your name using a stolen identity of with your social security number, which is out there. It's probably for sale on the dark web right now.
Yeah. I feel like at this day and age, I could buy a billboard in downtown and put my social security number on it, and I would be at the exact same level of security risk as I am right now.
Wasn't there somebody who tried that? Some guy, some like cybersecurity guy. Yeah, he put it on.
Work out?
No, he got hacked. No way.
That was a LifeLock guy. That was his
LifeLock guy. That's right.
Put it on a billboard, and but he was using fraud alerts. This is before freezing was a common thing. This company used fraud alerts, and sometimes companies that process new accounts don't even pay attention to fraud alerts. And that's what happened in that particular case, I believe.
No way, he got hacked? What happened?
Yeah.
I remember everybody was laughing.
Somebody took the social off the billboard or his van. He was driving around on a truck in a van and as marketing, and they opened an account in his name. And then, he was on a Today Show trying to explain, what happened. That's
no way. So he goes on did he do like a what do you call, like a save and face tour and say, oh, it actually wasn't that bad. They didn't steal. Well, how do you recover from that as the LifeLock guy?
Yeah. I don't know. I think they did because they got bought out by Norton. I think they did pretty well. They always say though, guys, that no publicity, or excuse me, any publicity is good publicity, even if it's bad.
I guess. Speaking of that, would have been something I would be afraid to share.
This just happened a couple months ago. So I get this thing from, it said it was LifeLock, and it said, hey, we're going to bill your account for, $345 for this year. I was like, what is this? Like, what is this all about? And so I called the number, and they're like, oh, yes, sir. We're going to bill your account. I'm like, oh, like what account? The credit card on file. I'm like, what credit card? The one that we have. and I'm like, but you can change it if you'll, and then they were trying to get information from me.
Oh, do you want to do a different one? Give me that one.
Yeah, if you want to change it, like, what do you want? And it's like, you guys don't, like, they didn't have anything. Like, it was just some bullshit. Yeah. But anyway, I almost fell for it. I called it anyway, rather than just deleting it.
Jeff, this will frustrate you, Jeff. So yeah. I had, I was trying to, I don't know what I was doing, move money to go buy something. So I'm moving account stuff around and I get a fraud alert from Chase, like a text message. And it was simple. It was like, was this you or not? 1 or 2. And so I felt comfortable responding. Yeah, that was me. And then I get a call and I answer the call and they're saying, well, it's fraud alert from Chase. We're calling to verify. And now I immediately have a red flag because I go, you already texted me and I already responded. Why would I also be getting this call? Mm-hmm. And so it was a little bit suspicious the way they were asking me questions and the way they were, talking to me about it. So as I'm talking with them and they're asking me, what's your social, what's your address, what's your number? I'm like, hold on. You're not asking me to confirm anything. You're getting new information from me. So I Google like the 1-877 number. And then I go, is this like fraud or not? And there were like 5 different articles about this number's fraud. So I just hang up. I go, 5 different websites said that's a fraudulent number. So then ultimately I find out a few hours later that money never went through. And I go, what the heck? I confirmed it with the text. And so I call Chase back and they're like, oh no, we got a fraud alert. I go, oh, so that was real? So then I say, what's your fraud alert number? And they go 877 the one that called me earlier that I looked up and said was fraud. And I go, hold on. So I call the number. I go, guys, I just need to let y'all know there's articles online that say this is a scam that say your number is a scam and you're calling me asking for my social security number. And they were like, man, I don't know what to say about that.
What are you going to do?
Yeah. Oh, that's how it goes.
Jeez.
Yeah. But, you got to watch out for those fraud alerts because they can be fake. That was a weird situation that you experienced. But so another quick story, this guy that told me what happened to him is a client of mine who I was doing an event for his clients. He says he got a text message. Did you make a $7,500 transfer from your account? And it said in the text message, it had the name of his bank. So they were spoofing it, right? But it wasn't his bank. It was actually someone putting out a fake fraud alert. So he says no, presses N, no, immediately gets a phone call in the text message or in the phone caller ID, name of his bank, again, spoofed. Oh, we're going to help you resolve this issue. We're going to transfer your money to a safe account. Now, how many banks are going to tell you that your money in our account is not safe? We're going to move it to another place where it is safe. Does that make any sense?
Why didn't you give me the safe account to start with, dude?
Yeah, I know.
Start me out in the safe account.
Drained out, yeah. 50 grand out, 50 grand out. He got it back.
Oh, wow.
Not after a lot of hassle. So, those fraud alerts, you got to watch out for those too, because they could be fake fraud alerts.
Yeah, that's scary. I think you're going to make me so skeptical. I'm not going to trust anyone.
And, the bottom line is you just have to check your accounts all the time, right? We don't live in a day and age where you wait for your monthly statement to come every 30 days and you can look at all the transactions and balance your checking account. Who does that anymore? But the truth is now you can look at your account on your phone in a matter of seconds. You don't have to put a password in. Use your Face ID. Everything looks okay today. And I'm not going to be worried about my bank account because nothing suspicious has happened. Do that at least a couple times a week, just in case something's happened. And it's easy to do.
What do businesses need to do to train their employees? Because large corporate companies can benefit from systems that prevent people from leaving them vulnerable, or big training programs to help people understand the threats. What can small companies do that don't maybe have the resources to do a big training push?
Just verify transactions, especially when they're involving money or access. So what the criminals are looking for are 2 basic things. First of all, they go for your money. And if they can't get your money directly, they'll go for information, which they can sell for money or use it to exploit a business or extort them for ransom payments. So anytime there's an attempt to get information or money, you trust it, but verify it.
Yeah.
And especially for small companies, one other thing I'll mention here is that when you get emails, they're from an external source. The flagging of the email should be done through software that says this is from an external source. A lot of companies are doing that, but not all. Don't click on links or attachments in this email unless you are absolutely sure of where it's coming from, and you were expecting to get this attachment or a link, and that you were expecting that from the source it was coming from. So that type of thing will up as well.
What's the scariest scam that you think is out there right now?
I think the one that's going after senior citizens in the Rome. It's not just seniors, but they're a big target. Romance scams, I say it's scary because it's a vulnerable target audience. People have lost a loved one, could be a widow or a widower. They go online. The criminals go online. They find obituaries. They target people specifically, going after them because they know they might be making poor decisions, and also fall for things like tech support scams or romance scams where you're trying to, play on someone's loneliness. All right. Now, on the tech support scam side, that's probably the more scary one because they're taking advantage of people that don't know a lot about a computer. They get a pop-up. They land somewhere in a website. They've clicked on a link and it says your computer's infected with malware. Call this number, and they get someone on the line that's very, very good at manipulating them. Oh, we're going to fix this problem for you. We need remote access to your computer. And they give them remote access because that's the easiest way to fix a problem, so they say. And then they ask them to log into their bank account. They could see how much money they have in there, and then they could target them for further scams. They could put malware on their computer. They could steal information, or even worse. Other part of that is when they want to get paid, not just those scams, but others. It's gift cards. If you hear those words, gift cards, in connection with any online communication, it is 100% of the time fraud. There's no legitimate reason why a business is going to ask you to pay them in a gift card. The FBI does not have a warrant for you, and you get out of it by paying with a gift card, nor do sheriff's departments. The tax authorities of the United States don't call you up and say you owe money on your last year's taxes, but we'll relieve you of the payment if you just send us a gift card. You won't get penalized any further than you already have. No, it doesn't happen that way. But people are doing that. They're sending gift cards. They're buying them online. They're giving them the number over the phone. And they're going to physical locations, buying gift cards and reading the number to the people, transferring money just like cash. Tech support scams, gift cards, romance scams. Lots of money being lost that way.
What I'm really taking away from listening to you explain these is, in a sober mind, all of these things sounds, or at least a lot of them sound really easily avoidable and kind of silly almost. Like, how did you fall for that? But my guess is that a lot of these people, if you sat down and asked them, hey, does that really make sense? Like, do you see why that would be maybe not likely, that it's the reality is what's being presented to you, that most people are probably going to go, oh yeah. And the reason they don't is because they're at a place of high emotion. They're either lonely or they're fearful, right? The FBI is coming now, they're scared. And there's some type of extreme positive or extreme negative emotion that's clouding their judgment. And that can happen in any area of life, not just cybercrime. It can happen in the hiring decisions that we make as business owners. It can happen in the way we spend our money. Non-fraudulently spend our money as business owners. It can happen a lot of different ways. When we're at extreme emotional points, we need to find a way to detach from that emotion, and that detachment first comes from recognizing what the emotion is. A lot of people are making decisions at high emotional peaks or valleys without even knowing what the emotion is that they're feeling. Like, we've got to stop, say, what am I feeling? Why am I feeling it? Okay, right. How could that maybe be impacting me? Oh, it maybe is making me a little bit more excited to get this deal done than normal. And that awareness is the first step to, I think, gaining what you're calling the common sense that's going to allow you to avoid a lot of these scams.
Yeah, it's fear and greed are two big emotional drivers, and they play off of both of those. You won a lottery that you didn't enter, those type of things. That doesn't make sense. You have to pay money after you've won the lottery. You have to pay the taxes in advance on it before you get your $1 million payment. Stuff like that. Yeah. So all of these schemes rely upon some type of emotional hook. And when, there's always going to be that. And never let emotions impede your ability to see things that don't make sense, right? Besides the emotion, something's not going to make sense, right? Sheriff's departments do not issue arrest warrants and let people pay the fine through a gift card over the phone, right? That doesn't make sense. So never let emotions, whether it's fear, greed, loneliness, which creates an emotional issue as well, never let that impede your ability to see the emotional hook. And if you do that, you're more than...
And I think you make a good point, Sanger. When we look at it here, we're talking, clear-minded. We're not emotionally invested in a situation. We're not in it. There's not urgency around our decision-making right now. And so it's easy to say, well, I wouldn't fall for it. I had a friend of mine a few years ago that her dad had fallen victim to one of these romance scams. And she knew it was a romance scam, and she had tried to communicate that to her dad. It had all the classic signs. The person, lived overseas. They could never meet face to face, and it just kind of
never do a FaceTime,
right,
never Skype, nothing.
What do you think someone could say that could sort of break that mental block that a victim is having as they're in the scam? What do you say to them to get them out?
Shawn, that's a great question. Here, I'll start with what you don't say. Don't criticize them. Don't say, how can you be so stupid? Because people will say that. And then you're causing the victim to retreat, right? They're not going to they're not going to say anything anymore. They're not going to tell you about it. And they want to rationalize their own behavior. I wasn't stupid. This is a real thing. I'm going to keep sending money to prove to myself that it wasn't a real thing, because eventually this person is going to FaceTime me. Eventually they're coming to the United States to meet me, as they're promising.
Yeah.
So if you start to criticize them, then they pull away from you, and they'll probably end up sending more money till they have no more money to send. So let's sit down, Mom. Let's sit down, Dad. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about what happened, and let's see if this really makes sense. And I know the situation you're in, but kind words, working through the logic of it, and understanding, real life examples, showing them examples where people have lost everything, and they will keep going after you till there's no money left. That's how brutal these people are. But certainly not criticism.
Yeah. When you look at all of, what we've talked about, what you learned from the FBI, what would you say would be your biggest single tip for people who are trying to avoid falling victim to this?
Yeah, just be careful. And I guess the good decisions involve, again, the emotional part. Be careful when everyone's asking you for information, unsolicited information, whether it's a text message, an email. Anytime you're being pulled emotionally, there's a problem with your account. Let's fix this right away before it gets worse. That's another emotional thing. You're going to get in not only to your email account, now they're getting into your bank account. Does that make sense, really? So those type of things, but also as you get a little bit older, and a lot of people don't want to admit this, but they don't want to ask for family members to have joint control of accounts or to have extra authority required before money is transferred out of an account. But that's a big important way that we can help people. So did you know that your mom is trying to withdraw $20,000 from this account? No, I had no idea. And that's an actual phone call I got just the other day from one of my clients who had already sent $50,000, and then finally the person at the bank said, "This doesn't sound right," called the son, and the son said, "No, that shouldn't be happening." So having family members involved in these kind of decisions and the checks and balances. I can't walk into a bank as an 85-year-old person and drain the account dry, cash over the counter, without someone calling another person in the family to say this is happening. That just doesn't make sense that banks would let that happen. But the law is the law. I mean, if somebody wants their money out and there's no other names on the account, they have to give that money to that person.
Oh, I had a friend of mine whose mom was in that vulnerable situation, and he finally had to just change all of her banking and financial records to just come to his house. And he was able to catch a lot of stuff because she had been giving to charities, just kind of over and over, and actually forgetting that she had already given money and giving again. And it was, she was pretty vulnerable, but that's another tip. Just kind of bring the rest back
Hey,
home.
Thanks for being here, Jeff.
Sure.
I learned a lot. I enjoyed our conversation. I've got a copy of your book, Cybercrime, here on the desk. Where can people connect with you, the work you're doing, and get a copy of your books?
Oh, sure. Just go to my website. It's www.thelanzagroup.com. So that's THE, Lanza is LANZA, group.com. my book's there, and also information about me and the type of work that I do and educating people on these kind of topics.
All right. Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it.
Jeff, thanks for talking with us.
Nice talking to you guys. Take care.
My takeaway from talking with Jeff is looking at having that two-factor authentication, number one, and then making sure that I've got unique and complex passwords.
Yeah. My takeaway is what I shared earlier about the emotional component of victimhood when it comes to cybercrime is so strong, and that's key with anything. So if we want to make better decisions, whether it's to avoid cybercrime or any other problem that could come in from the outside and threaten our business, being able to understand what emotions we're experiencing is the very first step.
You just made a great decision to listen to this episode of Decidedly. Make another great decision and leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen to podcasts. We appreciate your support. It helps others find our community and defeat bad decision-making in their own lives. For more daily decision-making insights, check us out at decidedlypodcast.com and on Facebook and Instagram at decidedlypodcast. Thanks again for listening. I'm Sanger Smith, and this is Decidedly.
Insights, advice, and comments provided by Shawn Smith, Sanger Smith, and speakers identified as part of the Decidedly podcast should not be considered recommendations. Speakers not identified as members of Decidedly are expressing their opinion, and their statements should not be construed as reflecting the views of the Decidedly team. This podcast is produced solely for informational purposes, not personalized advice.